Sandy and Manfred are two experts in the healthcare industry and in the automotive industry, and how technology is impacting these industries is a timely and omnipresent topic. And it's something that we have been addressing in various different ways at the Academy. Both John Kornblum with the Holbrook Forum and Pascal Levinson with the West Coast Initiative, we've been trying to address digitalization in general. And so we're really pleased that the two of you would agree to talk to us tonight. I wanted to read from a paper that was given to me by a professor at Johns Hopkins. And this paper was written in 1835, and the title of it is The Philosophy of Manufacturers. I can give you the whole paper, but one paragraph struck me. The principal, by the way, Andrew Urey is the person that wrote this paper. He was a professor at the University of Glasgow. He wrote, "The principle of the factory system is to substitute mechanical science for hand skill and the partition of a process into its essential constituents, for the division or graduation of labor among artisans. On the handicraft plan, labor more or less skilled was usually the most expensive element of production. But on the automatic plan, skilled labor gets progressively superseded and will eventually be replaced by mere overlookers of machines." So, mind you, this was in 1835. This was written. I want to say thank you to Christoph Keese. Christoph is a managing partner at Axel Springer Verlag. He is the author of 3 books on digitalization. The first one was Silicon Valley in 2014, then Silicon Germany in 2016, and Disrupt Yourself in 2018. And Christoph, thank you once again for joining us. Manfred Bischoff, who needs no introduction to our trustees, but to the others in the room. He is the chairman of the supervisory board of Daimler, a company he joined in 1976. He became CFO of Daimler-Benz Aerospace in 1989 and its management board chair in 1995. He was a member of Daimler-Benz's management board until 2003, and then the chairman of EADS, now Airbus, between 2000 and 2007, when he was elected chairman of Daimler's supervisory board. Sandy Peterson was Group Worldwide Chairman for Johnson & Johnson, where she oversaw the company's consumer and medical devices business. She was previously Chairman and CEO of Bayer Crop Science, CEO of Bayer Medical Care, and has held executive roles at Merck Medco, Nabisco, Whirlpool, and McKinsey. She is currently a member of Microsoft's board of directors and a trustee of the Institute of Advanced Studies. So please join me in welcoming all 3 to our stage.
So when Gail asked me to do this, I thought, oh, I could talk for hours and hours, or I could do this in 1 minute. It's kind of one extreme or the other. So I will try to give you a sense of how technology is changing healthcare overall and what it means and what the future will look like. I think when most people talk about digital health and the role of technology in healthcare, many people thought that from yesterday till today, we're going to have personalized medicine and everybody's going to have very specific solutions to their individual problems. And maybe someday that will happen, but we're very far from that happening. But there are a number of things that have happened in the world of healthcare that are making a huge difference. And I think if you think about the time horizon of technology breakthroughs, A dozen years ago was when the largest series of breakthroughs happened in technology. I keep asking my technology friends, what's the next 4 or 5 of those that will happen at some time in the near future? But if you think about it, the advent of cloud computing, which basically is you can get any kind of compute power you want on demand, was a huge transformation and a breakthrough in technology. All these wonderful devices that we all sat down and looked at after dinner was over before we got up on the stage, the advent of mobile technology, the advent of the changes in networking technology, the advent of what's called visual image processing, which allows you to actually see at a depth and do an analytics at very, very small levels of precision, which completely changes what was once a wonderful industry in Germany, which was the optics industry, but then it was a mechanical industry, and now it's all very digitized. The advent of that has made a huge difference. And then the other one I would mention, 2 others I would mention, is natural language processing, which means that you can take lots of unstructured information and make sense out of it in a way that you never were able to before. And last but not least, I like to talk about 3D printing, which goes back to Gail's point about what's the definition of manufacturing in the future. And all of those things really became relevant and scalable and commercializable about a dozen years ago. And in the first few years of that happening, you didn't really see it have much of an impact in healthcare in a very large way. There were lots of people like Eric Topol, who is well known for saying, you know, anybody can be diagnosed through their cell phone and all problems will be solved that way. That's really not how it's had an impact in healthcare. What I would say is that it's had an impact in healthcare in 2 very important fundamental ways. One is the technology that now exists enables us to have a biological revolution, like we had a revolution in physics 100 years ago. And because of technology, we now can learn things about the body in a way that we had no ability to do so in the past. And it's not just about decoding the gene, it's about doing lots of other things and understanding the body in a very different way. It's understanding how the brain works in a way that we never understood before. The role of the microbiome, 10 years ago, probably nobody in this room ever heard of what's the microbiome. Without actually the technology horsepower to do the work to understand and see these things, we would have no understanding of the importance of the microbiome and actually allowing people to get healthy and stay healthy. So all of these things have had a huge impact on our ability to understand the human body and understand how to get people well and keep them well in a very different way than has existed many, many years ago. It clearly changes the way in which research is done around medicines. Large pharma basically doesn't do any research anymore. Gail mentioned 3 large pharmaceutical companies that I've been associated with. In their heyday, they were wildly successful because they did a ton of research. They don't do research anymore. And all of this access to technology allows this ecosystem of small startup biotech companies to exist who actually do the breakthrough research, and then large pharma, if they're lucky, gets to buy these things and put them through their system. So the role of the pharmaceutical industry has radically changed as a result of all of that. Another aspect of the pharmaceutical industry that's, finally hopefully going to radically change is how clinical trials happen. The clinical trial process has not fundamentally changed since the 1980s. And if you think about it, it's pretty archaic. You sign somebody up who has a certain set of characteristics, you give them some medicines, you ask them to fill out, I'm being extreme here, but it's not that extreme. They have to fill out paperwork. They have to show up somewhere periodically and tell you how they're feeling. And if they are being honest, they didn't sit in the parking lot filling out all those forms right before they walked in to the clinic, which is frequently what did happen. But because of the advent of technology, we can put sensors on people and we can monitor their progress and see them real time live in a very different way than we've ever been able to do before. And it should enable us to actually do a better job of understanding the impacts of medicines on many different types of people. And as we know, it used to be there was a very small pretty biased subset of people who were actually given medicines for trial purposes. So it changes that. The other interesting thing it changes is the largest cost in developing medicines today is the safety and clinical trial process. And if you can completely blow it up, as they like to say in Silicon Valley, and do it in a very different way, it'll enable us to actually understand what kind of medicines can be helpful to human beings that have very, very different profiles. So that's another way that it's radically changing the role of the pharmaceutical industry. The other interesting thing is the kind of people pharmaceutical industries hire. They now hire technologists, not IT people, but technologists who actually understand technology. Bioinformatics is a massive, explosive industry. It's also, 15 years ago, you didn't get a degree in that. Now it's one of the most popular degrees at universities, and people really need to understand that. And so if you look at the profile in R&D organizations, there are many more people with that profile than pure chemists or biologists or biochemists, which used to be the profile in all those industries. So those are some examples. The other place where I think there's some really fascinating things going on is in the medical device space. So if you think about it, so first of all, 3D printing, when was the last time any of you went to a dentist and had to have a crown or a post put in your mouth or some more substantive thing than just a filling filled? In the old days, they'd take all these awful plastic molds, they'd ship them out, and by the way, Germany still is the best in the world, technology-wise on all of these things. They'd ship them out to somebody. 2 weeks later, you'd go back to the dentist's office. They'd have a rough imprint of that. And, they'd work on it, and they'd shave it down, and they'd send you away again. They'd send it back to the lab. It was a 4-week process. You can now go to a dentist's office. They 3D print your face. They immediately take that into a back room, and they 3D print whatever that post is, the tooth is, whatever it is. Think about the radical change that's made in dentistry. It sounds pretty mundane, but it's a big deal. The same thing is happening with implants. So if you need a hip or a joint or a shoulder replacement, they now can 3D print those things for you to be specific to your body type. The orthopedics industry as an industry literally had small, medium, and large sizes. Literally, that's what they used to do. Now you can actually do them that are bespoke to that individual. And then the other big thing that I find fascinating, that's a wonderful transformation that's happened, is if you think about how surgeons have been trained for years and years and years, surgery was basically an apprentice business. You would, finish your medical degree, and then you'd follow around a surgeon. You'd go into the operating room with them. You'd watch them. They'd let you do a few things. The next time they'd let you do a few things more. It literally was an apprentice model. Not very different than how airline pilots were trained 50 years ago. You'd have somebody in the cockpit with you for a couple of flights. Once you've hit a few hours, you're on your own. That's how surgeons used to be trained. We now have technology, and we use it, where actually surgeons basically, like in airline pilot simulations, they simulate surgeries now. And they simulate them, and they figure out where they're making the same mistake over and over again, and they practice it on a simulation, not on a human being. So that will radically change the way in which hopefully surgeries are performed, and the quality and the outcome will be the same everywhere. If you're very fortunate and you find a great surgeon who does the same thing over and over again, that's the surgeon you should go to. But the variability of surgeons is terrible. So this should change that in a very substantive way to enable people anywhere they go to be trained by, the best caliber surgeons by doing it through this digital process in a very meaningful way. I could give you 30 other examples, but let me just give you one other one, which Pascal ironically knows about. It's sort of interesting. We both have an interest in this business. So one of the other, there's a lot of challenges because there's massive inefficiencies in the healthcare system. I mean, it's not just that we don't understand the human body well, but there's massive inefficiencies in them. And one of the places where there are massive inefficiencies is people reading radiology scans. And it's an inefficient process for two reasons. One is there aren't enough radiologists. You have your scan done. If it's an emergency, if you're lucky, they'll get somebody to read it within an hour, and you are told what to look for. Like, go look for X, Y. So the doctor predetermines what you should be looking for. The problem is many times there's a huge backlog, and so if you're lucky, it takes them a week to read your scan, and then they will get back to you. There are many countries, particularly in Africa, where there literally are less than 10 radiologists in the whole country. So think about the impact that has on healthcare delivery. There are a few companies, and one in particular, which I won't make an advertisement for, but there are a few companies that said, you know what, this is a repeatable process, and we can train machines to actually look for patterns because it's a repeatable process. They've been at this for 10 years. And they took all of the radiology records of everybody in the country of Israel, because it's a state-run healthcare system, and they've also added many, many more to those. And they've done a couple things. Number one is their accuracy level for the things that they were supposed to look for and found far exceeds the human eye, because it's been trained so well. The second thing is they also find things that that a human being was not told to look for, that actually, because they see the patterns. And they will find things that mean that somebody may have something that was unanticipated that will also potentially save their life. And oh, by the way, the turnaround time is unbelievably quick. So the amount of delay for human beings waiting to find out what their diagnosis is significantly dropped. And, to me, the access to health care is actually one of the biggest travesties in the world. There are billions of people in the world, and 5 billion of them don't have decent access to health care. And if you can give this technology to all these little health clinics and hospitals in these countries that don't have access to radiologists, it makes a huge difference for people's lives. So those are just some examples. And I think what I would say about the role of technology, it is different than in many other industries, in that the sense of, technology companies thought they were going to blow up healthcare. In the 2000s, they were going to blow it up, and all these healthcare companies, technology companies, put money into it. It didn't work. But what is happening is that healthcare is being completely transformed, but not in the classic Silicon Valley blow-up way. And hopefully it'll enable us to have a better understanding of the human body, the translation of the mind-body impact, because we now know it's much bigger than we ever thought. And we are going to see the ecosystem of how healthcare is delivered and who's doing what in the system continue to evolve and change in a pretty radical way.
Sandy, thank you very much.
Yep.
This is fascinating. I've never heard a 10-minute recount. So precise. And by the way, before we go on to Manfred, it reminds me a lot of the media industry. The big publishing houses today don't have all the creatives employed by themselves. The big film studios these days don't really employ the film producers. 100 years ago, Charlie Chaplin, and you know that very well, and every electrician and every lighting specialist was employed by the studio. Today it's independent producers. So J.J. Abrams produces Star Wars and not the film studio. So the topography of different industries, not by coincidence, but almost by plan, is taking a similar path. Very fascinating. Thank you very much. And now we go to the car industry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I hope my voice will last. You see a typical example of the difference of German education and American education, because an American is trained in giving speeches and resolving the issue to cope with 1 minute and 10 hours for the speech. To discipline myself, I have to use notes. That is a difference of a German education. What challenges are facing the automotive industry? I think our industry is currently moving in a field of tension that is characterized by several revolutionary developments, from combustion engines to electric drive, from active to autonomous driving, from analog to digitally connected driving, and finally from vehicle ownership to needs-based mobility services. Each of these areas is a huge technical challenge in itself. The business model of car manufacturers will change more in the next 10 years than the last 100 years. Who will be the winners of digitalization that is triggering disruptive changes with such immense force? And I always make it very simple. The battle is out. You know, there are especially software companies, and I will come to that point, which are trying to just do that, what you just described, to the OEM car industry. Let me start from a different angle. What is the purpose of our company? And I talk about my company, I only can do. Let's make it simple. It's not to make money. To be profitable is a binding condition to be able to fulfill your purpose. Our purpose is to make individual mobility on wheels, because we are not in the air or water, available to people on a premium level. That is the purpose of our company. Today, mobility is equated with personal freedom. People take individual mobility for granted, especially in the developed countries. Mobility has become a basic need. The question we must ask ourselves today is, how can we maintain as much as possible of this personal freedom, of individual mobility, in these terms of growing populations and increasing urbanization? On the one hand, we know that by the year 2050, around 70% of the world's population is expected to live in cities. On the other hand, the growth of traffic in the big cities is leading to massive problems. In Beijing, we already have the longest traffic jams in the world today, and this city has fewer than 300 registered cars per 1,000 inhabitants. Let's assume that the registration numbers would rise to the level of southern German city of Stuttgart, such a simple one, where there are almost 600 registered vehicles per 100 residents. In such a case, traffic in Beijing would probably come not to a complete, but to a very extreme standstill. And my question simply is, how can I sell a Mercedes to a Chinese if he cannot move it anymore? And individual mobility would be gone. At Daimler, we subsume the key future topics for our industry under the 4 letters called CASE. You know, as an American habit, we adapted, which stands for connected, autonomous, shared services, and electric. Let me go through this 4. Connected. The automotive industry is facing a quantum leap. The connection of the vehicles to the cloud. Vehicles, as we know them, are becoming connected vehicles, and this opens up the completely new possibilities for manufacturers, for shipping companies, workshops, public authorities, financial partners, and many others. The concept of online access to the vehicle has given rise to the creation of business model, not least in the transport sector or in the area of mobility services, which go way beyond vehicle production and distribution. And I think every one of you expects, if he moves in his cars, that he has the same digital access he has at home or in the office. So you ask your car, where is the next good Italian restaurant around here? And it would be helpful if immediately, the car answers you where it is and brings you there, and also shows you the next parking place. Today, a modern vehicle operates with 100 million lines of programming code. In contrast, the entire space shuttle was operated with only about 4,000 lines of code. With regard to the car, whether powered by gasoline, diesel, hydrogen, or sunlight, each vehicle will process a large amount of data. For that reason, we call oil data is a new oil in our industry. And this will apply to our entire lives. Or take a look at the new share economy. Companies like Alibaba, Airbnb, Uber, or Facebook are now achieving market capitalization levels that are close, mostly much superior to the industrial old OEMs. The networking of different data sources is particularly important. We need an ecosystem for data. Just give you 2 examples. It is, how do you manage traffic? If you would know where every vehicle is and how he moves at what time, then you can really steer traffic. But that means you need to have that information. You need to have it in real time. You can see that today partially if you get your traffic information. You know what it is derived from today? It's from your mobility device. It's from your handheld phone, because we know where your phone is, independent of whether it's on or not. Usually we know where it is, so it's simple. If it's standing there, and there are 500 in a line standing there, there is a traffic jam. It's easy to indicate. If it's moving, you know it's moving. So, to steer traffic is you need this kind of data. And actually, this is, in the future, we need that is helped, dramatically helped by artificial intelligence. Because again here, artificial intelligence is the first to have, how is that data structured? Yeah, how can you derive from that? How likely is it that in a certain situation a traffic jam will originate here exactly at that spot or not? And here artificial intelligence can help you. The same is true, for example, if you have robotaxis. Artificial intelligence usually can simply find out at what quarter, at what time, which car amount is needed, so the cars can go exactly where they are needed in the future. So that means automotive manufacturers are thus transforming themselves into mobility service providers. According to the ownership of the data and the ability to interpret data with machine learning methods are becoming decisive competitive factors. In general, vehicles and entire traffic systems are becoming more intelligently adaptive. Let's go to autonomous. If one of our founding fathers, it was Gottlieb Daimler, still assumed that the worldwide demand for motor vehicles would never exceed 1 million cars, you know why? For lack of available chauffeurs at his time. I can guarantee you this fear shortage will be relieved at latest by autonomous driving. Along with many other benefits, the most obvious one are you don't have to concentrate on driving during boring journeys or overcrowded highways. You don't have to look for a parking space, but you can devote yourself to other things. People who haven't been able or are allowed to drive a vehicle yet, like children, physically handicapped, or very old people, could also gain access to self-determined mobility. However, there is also another, more important reason for autonomous driving. Today we have more than 1.3 million traffic casualties, deadly, per year worldwide. We don't know exactly how many because, for example, in countries like Nigeria, they don't count. At the same time, we know that more than 90% of all road accidents are due to human error. I think 1.3 million, this is worthwhile, the idea of our engineers, because that's like a war. Clearly, some of it used to drive, or to drive is wrong, to ride a car without a steering wheel and pedals for braking. But the ability to drive autonomously is strongly dependent on two developments: on the development of sensor technology, and secondly, on the software development for digital status display and the underlying algorithms required for making the corresponding decisions and giving commands to the actuators. I always simplify it. You have basically probably in the future car, probably it will be two central computers, not one, that has to do that you have to fend off outsiders. If you have those two, the software and the algorithms which command those, because they command everything which is in the car, whether it is steering, whether it's braking, but they also command the entire data traffic in and out of the car and inside the car. Basically, that means the battle is out between the software companies and us. Who controls that software? Yeah? Because that software, simply said, is the brain of the car. Yeah? If you don't control that software, that doesn't mean that you have to develop it yourself, but you have to get access to what we call the key codes. If you want to change something, if you need information, yeah, you want to upgrade it, then you need access to the key code of this kind of software. So the fight is out. Is the software coming from Google, or in this case more from Waymo, or is the software coming from us? At the end, at least that is my personal view, I'm not interested whether it's coming from us or not. I'm only interested in getting access to it. There's a second question which is also interesting. Is autonomous driving in the future a differentiation in competitiveness? It probably is not, because like China is building up a database, and you bring your autonomous capabilities against this database, and you have to show that your car can cope with all the traffic situation in the database. If that is okay, then you are allowed. But if you can do more than that is in the database, for example, the road work in Nigeria, or some train, override in Bangladesh, you don't get anything for it. So the question is, at the end, probably autonomous capabilities, because you need a permission. Every city today, by the way, China is the first advanced country which does it nationwide, is not a competitive difference anymore. So the question for our industry is, will we lose that battle and will others control that brain? Because then in German we say we would be degraded to the level of a hardware supplier, or as we say in Germany, to a tin bender. Let's come to shared. In the case of people living in urban areas, a change in mobility behavior is becoming increasingly apparent. Especially you see that with young people. They're not so much interested in owning a car. They're interested in the mobility a car avails them to use. Yeah? So, you have all kinds of car sharing. It starts from car sharing, ride-hailing, carpooling, multimodal, parking and charge services. So that means what these segments have in common is they offer mobility as a service, and no longer that you have all to own it. And we probably will see more and more people moving in that direction, especially, for example, I would be living downtown Manhattan, whether it would make sense for me to own a car. Because where can I park it? Can I use it to go anywhere? Probably mobility services would be the better way to get around. So I have a clear vision. Hopefully I will be sitting comfortably at home in 2030. It's a long way to go, and would like to go to the opera in Munich. I take my smartphone or what it is at that time and book a car from amongst a multitude of alternative robot taxis. Of course, I pick the offer from Mercedes. My mobile phone will tell me I will be in 7 minutes at your home, and 10 seconds before he arrives, the car gives me the signals, I will be right there. I have 3 simple questions. The first is, who makes that car? Who builds it? The second is, who operates the car? And the third one, who owns the car? Let's assume for a second that I would answer for Mercedes that question always with Daimler. Then we have a totally new business model. Imagine that we would have to own all those cars. We would have to operate all those cars. We have a totally new business model. That is not most unlikely that we will always own all of those cars, but that shows you that also financially, the question today we have a balance sheet of roughly 160 billion. Yeah? That balance sheet may be blown up to 600 billion. So there are also some really financial consequences involved. Autonomous driving poses but also some other crucial questions. For example, who owns the data generating during your journey? Is it you as a user, as a driver? Is it us as the producer of that car? Is it the communication company? Yeah? Is it the software company who controls the data? Who is the data owner? But even more complicated is the question, how far can you leave it to a robot to take decisions for dead or life? I give you a simple example. You're driving down inside the speed limit along a line of parked cars. Yeah? And suddenly little boys jumping behind a large SUV, you couldn't see it, out of the road. Physically, you're unable to stop, because the distance is too short. Physically, you're unable, and the robot is also unable because it's always inside the physics. The only chance you have, you just turn your steering wheel and go on the left side, but there a bicycle driver is coming. What is your decision? Today you take the decision. In autonomous cars, this has to be pre-programmed, otherwise it's a little kid. Yeah? So, the question is, and I call that simplified, we need, and that is a political decision because it's an ethical decision. You cannot leave it to the programmer of each OEM to say, okay, I prefer the bicycle driver, or I prefer the other car. So we need what I call the ethics for robots. Let me come to electrics, the last one and probably the most debated one. I'm convinced for a very simple reason, because I believe oil is a limited resource, a natural one, that at the end we have to use an energy which is renewable. So electric energy is the most obvious we have so far as a technology. Yeah? You can use artificial gasoline, but for the time being, the most promising one for sure is battery technology. There is the sideline for hydrogen, but I don't want to go into details. The last years we have seen tremendous advances in battery technology. We are not yet where we want to be, but the advances are so promising that we see that in maybe 5 to 10 years, we will, with electric cars, be competitive to combustion cars. But there are some aspects in battery area that we as a company depend on. Give you just two. The first is, how is energy created? How is electricity created? Is it by burning gas, by burning coal, or is it sun, or is it wave, or is it wind? So it's quite a difference. Just for my own company, if you take a little smart, an electric smart, and compare it to a diesel smart, then if you take the electro-mix in France, it's 90% better. If you take the electro-mix in Germany, it's the same, CO2 imprint. For a simple reason, because we still use a lot of coal, whereas France has 90% nuclear power. Nevertheless, we strongly believe that in the end it will be electric car. For this reason, we are investing, and by 2022, we will have 50 electrified vehicles, variants on the market, whereas on the electrified vehicles, we understand battery electric vehicles and hybrids. Hybrids usually have a little combustion engine on top, but they are both electrically driven. We have also to look at one thing. The electric engine has the advantage that at first glance, the environmental impact of the car is zero. But is that really true? We at the industry have to look on what we call well-to-wheel. That is the entire process, from generating the energy, what we use, to recycling the car at the end during the time of usage. And there are quite a few obstacles on the way, because also the production of a battery is not CO2 free. The recycling of a battery is not, the recycling of a car is not. So there are quite a few issues out. And I always say to everybody, because in Germany we usually have the hype, if somebody thinks now, electric car, that is totally local emission free, like it would be really emission free. It's not. And I always say, there is no such thing as a free lunch for mobility. Somewhere you have to pay a price for it. So the last one I want to mention is infrastructure. Where are all the charging stations you need for electricity? It's clear if you build a charging station today, and I call them simplified filling stations for electric vehicles, before there are 3 to 4 million on the German roads, they don't pay. That means the first 10 to 8 years, it's a loss-making business. So it's uninteresting for people to do that. Who will build those charging stations? That means the electrification of mobility will not be an immediate success, because we have to overcome quite a few obstacles, and some of those obstacles are not in our hand. Let me come to the end. I always say, nobody can exactly predict the future. But just, I usually turn around and say, if you think different, what have you thought about the cloud 10 years or 20 years ago? I haven't heard about anything about you saying about the cloud. So technology changes have the inbuilt thing that you usually can't see them before, when they will come and whether they will come. So there may be changes or not. So the picture I have described to you is my individual expectation. And it may come that way or they may be different. But I'm personally convinced we will continue to have individual mobility, increasingly more electric, and later also autonomous. Let me stop here for two reasons. The first is because otherwise I get too long. And secondly, I think it's much more interesting than you ask questions than I answer questions you don't have at all.
Thank you, Manfred. Thank you very much. So I promised we would just take 60 minutes of your time because it's pretty late for the evening. So we have about 20 minutes to discuss. So please prepare a question and raise your hand. Let me start off with the first question. You've mentioned business models before. And Sandy, there's this saying, and you said this before, data is the new oil, and one might continue the sentence, both are farmed on platforms, and data and oil are farmed on platforms. So platforms are incredibly important these days. When you look at the most valuable companies in the world by market capitalization, 7 out of the 10 biggest companies today are platform companies. And platforms are a two-sided market, not really offering the product itself, but organizing the market for supply and demand. So how does this relate to the industry, Sandy, you're overseeing? How much of the medical industry, the healthcare industry, will be a platform industry?
So I think it's a great question. Historically, it's been a product-centric industry to a large degree. I mean, obviously, hospitals are not products, but I mean, it's been very much a product-centric industry. But if you think about the changes I talked about, and you think about what we now learn and understand about the human body, the knowledge around that ends up allowing you to have much more of a platform. And to your earlier point, and you can acquire and distribute products that you create these ecosystems, right? Whether it's in the hospital setting, when it comes to surgeries, or whether it is with medicines of any kind, any other treatments, you do become much more of a platform-centric company. But the thing that I think is so interesting about it is if you asked any of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies, with one exception maybe, or any of the medical device companies, whether they are their future is to be a platform company and technology is king, they'd probably say, what are you talking about? That's not what we are. They would say knowledge is important and science and knowledge about science is important, but they would not actually translate it that way. There actually is one company that's sort of become much, it's in Switzerland at the moment, just to give you a hint, that is focusing on this in a much bigger way, I think, than anybody else is. Whether they can pull it off or not, it's not clear. But I don't think even those guys would say. Well,
there could be two reasons for this. Either they haven't understood it, or they are right in saying that it will not be platformized. So what do you think?
No, I think if you think about the companies that are being more successful today, they don't do everything themselves. So they're building an ecosystem. No different than a Microsoft or a Google or an Amazon is they don't do everything themselves, and they end up figuring out what other things do people need and create a very broad-based platform. So they do that. So I think that those, many more of these companies now are acquiring technology in a much bigger way and not doing it all themselves, and then getting rid of things that don't work.
And there's an underlying belief behind this, saying that the relevant creativity in your field of expertise is larger outside your company than you can ever hope it to be inside your company. So you're a chemical company, and the creativity outside your own company is bigger, but still relevant for you than can ever be in your company, because the rest of mankind is bigger than the number of employees.
You need to know, that's true, but again, This is why all the tech companies failed when they tried to be successful in healthcare. They didn't know enough. They didn't have domain knowledge to pick the right winners. So they were smart technologists, but they actually didn't get the context right. So that's why so you do need some knowledge and expertise, but you don't need to do it all yourself.
And this is what many people call the T model, right? You need horizontal knowledge, platform knowledge, plus domain knowledge.
Right.
So vertical knowledge plus horizontal knowledge combined, T model beats. And this is why T model is one of the reasons why Uber is not only a platform company by now, but building their own fleet, because they want to own parts of the fleet and at the same time be a platform organizing, orchestrating the market.
So far, they have no ownership.
No ownership?
No.
They're just organizing.
No, they are asset free. They're asset free companies. That is their basic business model is to be asset free. I'll just give you an example. We had the discussion with the founder of Uber, and he told us, if you have the first autonomous S-Class, I buy $1 million. I said to him, how are you going to buy it? You don't have the money. He said, you're going to finance it. I said to him, why should I do that? If we're going to finance the car we build, we can also operate it. Because his problem for the time being is operating what he does for the time, because what is his platform? He connects a driver who owns a car with a customer and has a collection system on it. That's all he does. That is his platform. That is easy. That is not so difficult to, this platform. Actually, we do the same, and we also have a joint venture now with BMW where we do exactly that. Yeah? So the question is, coming back to what you said, I agree with you that also in our industry, 95% of the technology we introduced in the car was not invented by us. The old Schwabian saying, which, if it would be any good, it would be invented by us. That was the old Daimler saying, yeah. That has gone many years.
How many years ago?
Probably 50 years ago. 50 years. But in the meantime, it's at 95 to 98%. So, the art of automotive production is, I call it technology scouting. You have to find the technology which is interesting to bring it into the car and be able to bring it in the car.
And be a system integrator.
And be a system integrator.
Together, yes.
Because a car, by the way, a car is a rather complicated product, which, our friend from Tesla has just found out it's not so easy to build cars. Sometimes, they burn down if you don't want it. So, it's a complicated product because it satisfies quite a lot of needs or whatever, of wishes of customers. Yeah? And, the art is in integrating the different kind of technologies and using also platform technologies. Naturally, we will use them.
No, I think you got a very good point. I totally agree. I'm an economist by training, so I'm not a technologist. What you described,
I'm also an economist.
True.
Hey, guess what? So am I.
Are you? So when talking to technologists, I always find, looking to my own trade, that the kind of revolution that is taking place in technology is pretty much the revolution that is taking part in business models. So much of the revolution that has been happening over the past 20 years is a revolution in business model. Just look at Schindler and Otis, for example. They're not selling elevator and escalators anymore. They're selling vertical persona kilometers.
But you know what the reality is 100 years ago? The last big technology revolution completely revolutionized business models also. So it's not that surprising. Right?
Which one do you mean?
Well, it's not that surprising.
Electricity?
Well, no, it's the chemical industry, electricity. I mean, the automotive. It created a business model that was a very specific business model that doesn't work with the current set of technologies. So therefore, the business model has got to change.
So in the hen and egg discussion, you would say technology first, and then comes the new business model.
I think I don't think you can say what comes first. I think they end up working with each other. I mean, they end up being synergistic with each other, and they multiply over time.
If you don't have the technology, you have no new business model.
Yeah.
So it's clear there has to be first a technology development, and somebody has the idea what to do with it.
Right, but then it reinforces because you've changed the business model and technology
I would offer
evolves.
An alternative interpretation, which would be they have always been business people dreaming of things or models that simply were not possible without technology, and then technology comes along and makes them feasible. So when you build a skyscraper, do you really want to buy an elevator? No, you don't. You just want the thing to run as conveniently and smoothly as possible. Technology didn't allow for any other business model, but all of a sudden it becomes possible. But we don't have to discuss hen and egg problem, but I would argue for my trade that it's many times business people that dreamt of stuff that wasn't possible, and all of a sudden they meet the right technology and makes it possible.
No, startups basically always functions that way.
Yeah.
Somebody sees a technology and says, okay, whether he already had that idea or just gets that idea doesn't matter for me. He just has an idea of a business model where he can use the technology. That is how startups work, in my view.
Please.
So, both your statements, the right to own the data or control the data was sort of core. I got you right. So, who do you think will own the data in the future?
The government.
In
China.
That's pretty scary. I don't know the answer to that question, Oliver. I think it's one of those things that lots of people think they own the data, unless people think they own slices of the data, and I think it's going to make it, I think it makes it very complicated. I do think the interesting thing is this conversation about, data is the new oil. 3 years ago, most people in the business world would have never understood that. That would have never even been something they would say. So I think one of the interesting things is people have finally realized that, the new currency is understanding the data and having access to it. You don't necessarily have to own it.
Right.
You have to have access to it to get insights out of that data. So owning it, in some cases it's impossible to own it. In the healthcare environment, it's probably impossible to own all the data, but getting access to it and getting better insights out of it than anybody else can is what's going to end up giving you currency.
Plus ownership implies that it's only owned by one entity,
Right.
whereas usage it could be open to many stakeholders, could
Right.
it?
Well, and you create new data if you've got really good algorithms in machine learning, right? That you own.
So 4 more. 1, 2, 3.
Well, I wanted to follow up. That's why I raised my hand, because there's another side to this, which seems to me became very, very evident in the last couple of years, and that is conflicts over data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Facebook or what Boeing is doing
Yes.
with data. The EU came out with a new data regulation, et cetera. It seems to me that we're headed for something bordering on chaos as far as who owns data. Is Facebook a publisher, as I think some people in Europe would like to say, or is it just a platform which puts out data?
Mm-hmm.
So how is that going to work out, both in the industries that you know, also in the medical pharmaceutical industry? People's personal medical data is always considered to be almost sacred.
Right. Right.
Are these problems solvable, or is there going to be a great big collision someplace about data?
Well, go ahead.
I think we need some basic rules in the world in the future. If I think, for example, take traffic. Traffic is also a database, nothing else. Yeah. So the question is, if somebody said I would own that database, that would be totally detrimental. So today it's clear that we as an OEM have an advantage against a software company which is trying to get into the car industry, because we know much more about traffic than they do. And some of them have found out that it's a little bit difficult to build a car because it's more than only software. So the question is, who owns that data? And the question is basically, as you rightly point out, the most important is access to that data. Is that free or is it controlled? And who controls it? Yeah? What does ownership here mean of data? Can I own data? And which kind of data can I own? Can I own my personal data? Give you an example. We had a 2-year fight with Google about introducing in our car, the entire touch screen and everything you want to have in the car. Who owns the data which is generated in a car? Google said it's ours because you're using our software. Clearly, we get all the data. We said, no, it's a customer. And today we have with every customer an agreement in how far he allows that we use his data. for example, for preventive maintenance. We need an agreement of the customer because that is his data, whether his car will break down in 2 weeks or not, to do preventive maintenance. And these questions have somewhere to be regulated worldwide because we can't have it different in China, in the United States, and then in every second city in Europe. Yeah?
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add to it is, I think until a couple of years ago, there was definitely the sort of the Wild West of the tech world. And it was a classic example of technology will only be used for good, which is naive, as we all know. We've lived through that. But there are people in the tech world who now are saying, no, we want regulation. We actually need regulation to get clarity about rules of engagement around technology and privacy. And so I think the industry is maturing, and I think it means that they also can then have conversations with more mature industries who've lived through this and understand it. So I don't think we're going to have a crash. I actually think and hope we'll get to a good place. The worrying thing is if we have 7 different regulatory regimes around the world around this issue.
That is awful.
That's the problem.
And by the way, John, we don't believe that Facebook is a publisher because they don't assume responsibility, and they are not covered by First Amendment or Article 5. They don't assume responsibility. You cannot be a publisher if you don't assume responsibility for what you publish. Maybe 2 more questions, you and you, please.
Okay. First, thank you, Manfred and Sandra. That was absolutely fascinating. I know nothing about these subjects, so I feel very, very much better informed, but still ignorant on some level. And I also have 1,000 questions, but I do want to limit it to still can't get my brain around how a surgeon simulates cutting flesh with a machine. But that's not my question. My question is some of the political implications for what we are talking about. The number of people whose lives and jobs will be affected by autonomous cars is much discussed. But in your realm, Sandy, what will this kind of data and technology do to the cost of medicine?
Right.
Because we know, at least in this country, the cost of medical services is huge and always rising, and it's very much a political problem. So how do you see this playing out?
So, the crazy thing about the U.S. is it's the most inefficient healthcare system in the world.
Is it?
Yeah, it is literally the most inefficient healthcare system in the world.
You don't think we beat it in Germany?
No. Germany actually is quite... No, that's not true. Actually, Germany actually, the percentage of the total cost that's administrative cost is very low in Germany and Switzerland and even the UK, which is maybe surprising. But it's so the big problem... Yeah, but it's the
17 for the United States.
Yeah, but if you look at that 17%, 40% of that cost in the U.S. is administrative costs. It's because it's a highly fragmented system in the U.S. So my big hope and stuff I've worked on over a number of years is how to get rid of all that inefficiency in the system. And quite honestly, technology has done that. I don't love Amazon, but they've made ordering and delivering and buying things massively efficient. Yeah. And technology used to go after that problem will make a huge difference. There is a, sorry, this is, I get on my high horse on this topic. There is a degree you can get in the United States, which is a medical claims processing degree. Think about that. You literally can get a degree on how to shuffle paper around and do matching of coding from one system to another. A computer system can solve that problem, and you'd get rid of thousands and thousands of these awful low menial jobs and put people to work doing different things. So I think you can get the cost. It will enable us to get the cost down. And my surgery example it should allow us to have a better standard of care so that the quality of the procedure goes up.
But aren't there huge obstacles to getting everybody, all these different
constituents? Yeah, but the U.S. healthcare system is being wildly consolidated as we speak. So it will look a little bit more like a European system.
And please tell us, how do you cut flesh in a simulator? Her first question.
Oh, well, so you actually, I could, if I could find, I could put it on my computer and show you how you actually do these procedures. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing, actually.
We'll start the board meeting.
No, we're not.
Yes. Okay. Last question, please.
Whom are we going to say?
Your turn.
I very interestingly listened to the
expectations on how you will change your business model from being a system integrator, assembler, to really becoming a service company. So this will not only be a relevant, significant change in business models for the OEMs themselves, but for the suppliers, and on the other side also for the distributors, for the garages and everybody. So how will this affect the whole industry? How will be the plans to actually make this change happen and integrate it? Are these also questions you are discussing and thinking about?
No, we are very selfish. We think about ourselves primarily, yeah? And not so much about the supply industry. Yeah?
Not just the supply, also the distributor side.
So for the distributors, it's an issue, clearly, because more and more we already have two models out where we test online direct sales. Now, a car is something, I don't know how you feel, but I would like to see it before I buy it. I would like to sit in it, and I would like to, smell how does it smell? Because some smells like very good leather, the other smells like plastic, depending on the model. Yeah? Ours smells more like leather. Yeah? Yeah. And that means there is a role for the dealer, yeah, because you need a point of delivery. You cannot say, okay, you come to everybody can come to Sindelfingen and pick up their car. You need a delivery model worldwide. So our sales organization will have a different role, because increasingly I see more and more of the contracts will be done online. And I see already today that 70% of the people configure their car online. The problem is they configure their car and they then go to a dealer and say, I want to see that car. But he can't have all the cars available. That's impossible. So we have a software to tell them, if you want to see your car, you have to go to Frankfurt. There is one. Yeah? No, the main issue is a different one. If you take an electric car, compare the electric drivetrain to a combustion drivetrain, it's 1/10 of the labor content. That means entire factories which do combustion engines and do gearboxes will be gone. And that is substantial reduction in moving out of the OEM industry, partially also with suppliers, depending in what areas they are. Because for sure, we OEMs will do not the electric motors, because electric motors are done by different people already for 150 years. So why should we build a better electric motors than they do? Yeah? And that is a question for societies, that more and more of the functions, and I see that in our company because we are talking about the digitalization. Look at something like accounting. In our headquarters, we used to have 600 accounting people. Today, if we have accounting people, they are sitting in Portugal or in the Ukraine or in India, because you can do them online very easily, and they are 1/10 of what we had before, because most of the accounting is done by robots. You see, we have, I think, a real question in society is that the digital world will free, especially the more simplified labor, and it's eating into the middle class more and more, and we see that. And that is creating, I see, a social problem over time, because it's also clear the people who have done it's not the assembly of a car will be the same. It doesn't matter whether you put electric engine in or a combustion engine, but you need more qualified people. You need the technology guys. You need the IT guys. You need the software guys, and that's the simple labor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The retraining of those people you set free will be a severe problem, because let's be realistic. With 10% you may have a chance. With 90% you have no chance.
That's like a very sober note to the end of our discussion. Let me finish with one final question, and I would both of you like to answer with one word. My oldest son is 14. What should he study? What should he study?
Law.
Yeah, the last one turning out the light would always be a lawyer. That's for sure. Yeah. So, what do you think?
I would say he should study whatever form of technology without technical progress, we will not resolve the issues of the world of tomorrow.
So not economy.
No, nothing wrong with economy, but through economies don't change the world dramatically.
Okay, interesting. And what do you say?
History and philosophy.
Oh, really?
Yes. You can learn technology.
Really?
Yes.
Can
You
history
what?
and philosophy? Why?
Because you can learn technology. I mean, you know, it's if the people who are at universities today doing computer science and learning how to be developers and coders, their expertise and knowledge will be obsolete within 10 years because of how fast the technology is changing. So it's better to have fundamental learning skills and problem-solving skills than it is a technical specific knowledge.
It's quite interesting. Alex Karp of Palantir, he's a philosopher. He started with Habermas in Frankfurt. And when Peter Thiel called him to hire him, he said, I cannot do this. I'm not a technologist. He said, yes, you can do it because you're a philosopher.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, that's an upbeat note, is it? Philosophy and history changed the world. Thank you very much, both of you.